Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really big question, one that's at the very heart of family life. How does parenting connect to a child's mental health? We're going to look specifically at what are called internalizing disorders. So think anxiety and depression. And what the research shows is that this relationship is way more of a two-way street than you might think. So let's just dive right in by, challenging one of the oldest and most common ideas about how parenting actually works. For the longest time, the model was pretty simple, right? Parents act, kids react. But what modern research is telling us is that it's a much more dynamic, much more complex reality. The influence doesn't just flow one way. It's this constant feedback loop. And the key concept here is something called bidirectional effects. You can just think of it like a feedback loop. A child's unique personality, their temperament, their mental state, that can naturally pull certain responses out of a parent. And then, of course, those parental responses turn around and shape the child. It's this constant mutual dance that affects the well-being of, everyone in the family. Okay, so now that we've got this idea of a two-way street, let's look at some specific parenting behaviors that research has pointed to as potential risk factors for anxiety and depression in kids. The research draws this really critical line between two different kinds of control. On one side, you've got psychological control. This is the emotionally manipulative stuff, using guilt or shame or withdrawing love to get a child to do something. And that is consistently linked to more depression and anxiety. But then you have behavioral control, which is just about setting clear rules, expectations, and consequences. And that's often linked to really positive outcomes. So they're not the same thing at all. This really shows how our best intentions can sometimes have these unintended side effects. Overprotective parenting almost always comes from a place of love, right? You want to shield your kid from distress. But by taking away all the challenges, you can also accidentally rob them of the chance to develop their own coping skills. They don't get to build up that sense of confidence, that feeling of, hey, I can handle this, which psychologists call self-efficacy. But it's not all about risk. Not at all. The research is just as clear about the kinds of parenting that can act as these powerful, protective buffers against those very same internalizing disorders. If there is one single universal finding in all of this, it's this: parental warmth. Across studies, across cultures, showing affection, offering support, encouraging open communication, it consistently protects a child's mental health. It just communicates this fundamental bedrock of love and acceptance. Now, here's another fascinating protective factor. It's what the researchers call challenging behavior. This is all about gently pushing kids to face their fears and tackle challenges that are appropriate for them. It helps them build resilience. And what's really interesting is that one huge analysis found this was especially effective when it came from fathers. Maybe, and this is just a maybe, it reflects a kind of traditional role of encouraging kids to go out and push their limits a bit. And this brings us to such a vital point. No single parenting behavior exists in a vacuum. Its effect can totally change depending on the specific kid, the family, and the broader cultural context they're living in. This quote from the source material, it really gets to the heart of it. This idea that there's some single, perfect parenting style that works for every kid, everywhere, it's a myth. What works for one child might be totally wrong for another. It's all about the fit. So let's unpack that a little bit. How exactly does culture get in there and shape parenting? How does it change the way a kid interprets what their parents are doing? Here's a perfect example. In so-called individualistic cultures, like in the US, the goal is often about raising an independent, autonomous adult. But in many collectivistic cultures, the focus is much more on interdependence, on family loyalty. Because those goals are different, a behavior that feels controlling in one culture might feel like caring and protection in another. And this table just brings that complexity to life. Look at authoritarian parenting, a style that's high on control, low on warmth. For European American kids, the studies pretty consistently link it to more anxiety. But for some Latin American youth, the exact same style is linked to fewer symptoms or no change at all. It just shows you how much cultural norms can completely alter the impact. And listen, this isn't just some academic debate. The stakes are incredibly real. A recent CDC report found that a staggering 47% of Hispanic adolescent girls said they felt so sad or hopeless that it actually got in the way of their daily lives. That number, it just underscores why having a culturally aware approach to family and mental health is so vital. So, where does all this leave us? Well, the good news is that parents aren't just part of the context of the problem. They are absolutely essential partners in the healing process. One of the gold standard treatments for youth anxiety is something called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. It's a really structured process. It teaches kids actual concrete skills. They learn how to cope with anxious feelings, how to challenge those distorted thoughts, and, this is the big one, how to gradually face their fears. It's a process called exposure therapy, and parents can be an absolutely vital source of support through it. But wait, does including parents in therapy always make it better? I mean, intuitively, you'd think so, right? But in reality, the research is a bit more nuanced. Whether parent involvement helps can depend on a whole bunch of things, like the child's age, their specific disorder, even the parent's own mental health. So it's not as simple as just more is always better. So when you pull all of this research together, one thing just stands out, head and shoulders above the rest. While the effects of control and discipline can be really complex and depend on the context, the power of simple parental warmth, that's the most consistent protective factor there is. It really seems to be the true bedrock of resilience. And maybe that's the ultimate takeaway here. The research seems to suggest we should shift away from that really rigid, judgmental question, am I a good parent? And instead, maybe we should be asking a much more flexible, more powerful, and more present question, what does my unique child need from me, right here, right now? That small shift in focus, well, that might just be the most important parenting tool of all.